now going to speak about brand stewardship. So we spoke a bit about evaluation and valuation in the morning in David's presentation. We now heard about strategy, we heard about campaigns and in investment and tourism, and we now want to talk about how this all comes together in a brand stewardship framework, and a sort of end-to-end place brand management system that we're currently collaborating on with the Place Brand Academy. So the way this is going to work, we've got an hour before lunch. We're going to present for the first 30 minutes, first myself and then Malcolm Allen from the Place Brand Academy. And then for the latter part of the session, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to have a discussion. And these are going to be roundtable discussions. So the way that you're seated, you're going to have 15 minutes to discuss a few questions on the topic of the workshop with your peers. And then for the following 15 minutes, we'll have Penny from the Place Brand Academy moderating the discussion among yourselves. So each table will need to nominate a spokesperson to then share your insights with the room. So we hope you all find that stimulating and interesting, and we can all learn from each other. Okay. First of all, why do we even need to manage place brands? So why are we even discussing this topic? Why are we here in this room? Why do we need a strategy? Why do we evaluate those brands? And why do we think they need to be managed over time? Well, for many countries, first of all, a place brand exists, whether you like it or not, whether you manage it or not. And the whole challenge is to help shape those perceptions in a way that's beneficial to the people that live in that place. So obviously for Brazil, it's fantastic that it's associated with a vibrant culture, with festivals, with music, and there's a lot that the country gains through that. But it's not the only face of Brazil. There's a lot of innovation, science, there's great businesses, but people don't really think of those things when they think Brazil. So a place brand strategy for that country can help shape perceptions and ideas about Brazil in a way that fosters investment and trade relations that otherwise perhaps wouldn't be there if not for that articulation of what the place has to offer and what it can be associated with beyond the sort of stereotypes that you've got out there. And then the other issue is a bit more sinister and a bit more problematic, is that it's not just existing stereotypes that sort of develop more naturally, but it's also disinformation and misinformation. So the negative propaganda that many countries or non-state actors are using to basically smear their peers and to undermine their place brands. So it's very important that we tell our own stories about our own places and that we counter that disinformation and misinformation with a positive narrative or with a truthful narrative, in a way that Laura was discussing with David this morning, in a way that London is currently being undermined internationally with horrible and absolutely appalling disinformation, often AI-generated content. A few examples of countries that have made a conscious decision to manage their nation brand well, and that have done that successfully. South Korea, we've all heard of K-pop, we've all heard of K-cinema, but probably if I were to say that sentence 10 years ago, you'd be wondering, what is he on about? Because 10 years ago, we had not heard of K-pop or K-cinema on the scale that we have now, and that's not a coincidence. It's not something that happened organically. South Korea's government has made a conscious decision to invest in creative industries, has made a conscious decision to position South Korea in a certain way, invest in certain sectors, and to portray certain values and ideas about Korea that have benefited not just those industries, but the country as a whole, both in terms of economic benefits across sectors and also in terms of security benefits. Because obviously, the more often we think about a country, the more it is top of mind, the more affinity we feel with it, and the more likely we are to care when something negative happens to it. And another country that's a fantastic success story is the United Arab Emirates, which have really build international influence as a bridge between different countries, which have really positioned themselves as a success story in business, in investment, in finance, in logistics, in all sorts of sectors beyond oil and gas that they had traditionally been known for, and also in governance. And that's a set of perceptions that's developing quite rapidly and in a positive direction that perhaps a few years ago was still not something that people would associate with the UAE. And they've done really well going up all the way up to 10th mark in the Global Soft Power Index across the years. So what makes a place brand really successful, like South Korea or the UAE, or Finland, or Sweden, or the other ones that we've heard of or will hear about today? First of all, clarity of purpose and ambition. The team that's behind the strategy or that is managing the nation brand or the place brand needs to actually know why they're doing it and needs to want to do it and commit to it and deliver it with potency. Second, engagement and understanding of stakeholders. Like Maida was saying, it's important that you get the buy-in of the population. It's important you get the buy-in of all of those different stakeholders in the private sector, in the public sector, in the third sector, in education, etc., etc. And they need to be involved along the way so that when you then present that strategy, you're not facing a wall of distrust and raised eyebrows or even worse than that. 3, authentic and inspirational. You can't make up a place brand because unlike a product which you can come up with from scratch and then brand it however you want, a place brand exists. People live there. There's normally a history behind it. So whatever it is that you're telling as a story about that place needs to be consistent with what people can experience. 4, rooted in reliable data and insights. I'm very grateful for all of our friends for mentioning the Global Soft Power Index, and there's many other studies and there's many other things that people can be doing to make sure that their nation brand is informed by data and it relies on real-world evaluation of what people think and how people operate. 5, coherent across audience journeys. That's something that we often forget about, and that sort of goes in the territory of implementation and stewardship already. So not just having a strategy, but also thinking, how is it actually going to be applied across the different pathways in which our stakeholders interact with our place? Different for tourists, different for students, different for investors, etc. And 6, resilient governance and stewardship. So making sure that it isn't just a one-off project, it isn't just something that we invest in at a given time, it isn't just a set of campaigns, but there is actually a long-term vision for how we can make this place better through branding and marketing efforts. And that's the sort of model that we're looking at the moment. All of those things are worthwhile doing, and there's many countries and campaigns that do it well, as you can see with the examples on the screen. But if you're just focusing on sort of one-off promotions, they're more tactical, they're more point in time, they're more effort-oriented. If you then take it a notch up and you focus on campaigns, nation brand marketing and investment in trade and talent and tourism, those are fantastic. They're normally a bit more planned, a bit more oriented towards actual gains in terms of revenue coming into the country, but they would still be relatively short-term and sort of finishing within a certain time frame and scope. If you've then got a strategy, it organizes all of those campaigns and promotions within a single narrative. It's much more strategic, it's got this long-term vision, and it's much more oriented towards an ambition to change certain perceptions about the country and to improve the way people live in that country across the board. But then that sort of final pinnacle of that sort of the ideal of how you could be managing a place brand is that approach with stewardship at its heart, much more holistic, led by governance. It's something that's ongoing. It's something that is oriented at actual impact, not just ambition or not just short-term gains. So it's about sort of long-term governance of the brand and the continuous refinement of the narrative, of the strategy, and of the way that you interact with others. Why do you need any of it? I think we've spoken about that before, because there is that clear link between perceptions and performance, and that virtuous circle which you want to tap into. And together with Paula Oliveira, our head of strategic services at Brand Finance, we've come up with a framework for developing a successful place brand strategy, including end-to-end management, from defining your ambition, mapping stakeholders, identifying benchmarks and targets as part of a sort of brand audit. Where are we? Taking stock, that Meira called it. Then analysis, understanding perceptions and drivers of those target audiences and segments, auditing the audience journeys that they undertake to interact with our brand, examining the economic performance and knowing where to invest so that we can get the biggest return. Then the actual strategy, so conducting opportunity analysis to make sure we're ticking all the boxes that we want to for this to be impactful, developing different scenarios and testing them, involving stakeholders across the board, but especially in that phase, to then articulate the final strategic framework, the values, and the central idea that's going to then guide the work across the board. But then you need to implement that strategy. It's fine to have it, but it's not something to put on a shelf. It's something to live and to use. And therefore, you need to create a brand roadmap that tells you how to roll out that strategy across the different channels and across the different stakeholders. You perhaps want to review your visual identity and the messaging that you're currently using across those channels. Then plan new touch points and new initiatives. Also, adjusting those stakeholder journeys in a way that's consistent with the brand. And then finally, that long-term vision, that stewardship, designing a governance model that lasts, building capacity, training the teams that need to be implementing and using the strategy, and then establishing an evaluation framework to make sure you can appraise it and go back to stage one whenever you're ready for it after a certain period of time, because a strategy needs to be a living, breathing organism that, after time, gets adjusted. And well, looking at it now, I don't think we have quite enough of sauna in those steps, but that's something to be rectified. Very briefly, prudent stewardship is rooted in brand measurement. That's our structure for the Global Soft Power Index, as you can see, looking at all the different aspects of how a nation brand can be perceived. And finally, the key message that I think we want you to get from this session is that it's all about coordinating the stakeholders and taking all of them into a common place where they can accept that strategy, make it their own, and speak with the same unified voice, and therefore make that strategy viable in the long term. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Malcolm Allen to talk a bit more about exactly that. How do you coordinate those stakeholders, and how do you make sure that governance in the long term makes sense? Green to go next.
Okay. Good day. I'm going to tell you a bit of previous about me. There's a wonderful expression the Metropolitan Police use when they get a criminal and they're saying, what's he like? He's got a lot of previous. Well, my previous began in December of 2002 when I created what I think, and I could be wrong, the world's first tactical place branding agency. I'd had a previous 10 years running things called training and enterprise councils in the UK. And the experience that gave me was that for 3 counties in the southeast of England, 3 of the largest counties in the UK, bringing communities together to speak with a common voice, and we didn't use the term place branding or even marketing at the time, just getting them to work with each other for the common good. Since then, I've worked as a place brander for 24 years, and about 2 years ago, I decided that actually, as a result of some people speaking to me, said, mate, you've been doing this for 24 years, why don't you sit down and try and share what you've learned, good and bad, about how we do this? And that led to the creation of what's now called the Place Brand Academy. Place Brand Academy is the first academy of its type in the world. It's online, it's 24 hours a day accessible, and it offers something that no one else in the world does. It offers continuous professional development accreditation for people working in the field. And any of you in here who are working in the field, you want to do one of our courses, we charge a reasonable price for them. We all have to live and have our bread and butter. But if you get it, you get a credit towards it that places increasingly know means you are good at what you do. You are professional about what you do. You know what to do. And you have certain character traits. I'm going to discuss some of that. So for a long time, we have been looking at the training for people coming into the field, how to set things up, and you've heard a lot about that today. But now what we're focused on, and particularly with brand finance, is that the system that surrounds place brands is broken. Place branding work is very good. And a colleague of mine who's here, Mary Harris, can you stand up? Mary is from a company called Bird, and she and colleagues have just produced a report which went onto the internet through LinkedIn last Friday called Place Branding is in good shape, but the system around it is broken. By the system, I mean how place brands interact with all the agencies and other things around them. And the thing that is pretty poor around the world is there is no rational understanding of what the governance of a place brand is about. It's not just the governance of the team, it's the governance of how they use the place brand in the wider world. And the big issue that's come around is we all know place brands don't have enough money. We all know we're strapped for cash. We all know that politicians want to spend their money in other places. So the corollary to that, and the implication of that, is where is the money going to come from? It is with the stewards of the brand, the people, not just the people who've made the brand, but it's the people who will actually be implementing the brand. And our research shows that, roughly speaking, in the first 2 or 3 years of a brand being developed, the majority investment is from the public sector to pay for the work to get done. But once the brand is alive and kicking, who is it who provides the money for the brand to be activated, for the offer to come about? Any ideas? Who pays for it? It is the population of the place who buy the products and services that stimulate the demand, that stimulate the investment. It's the investors in business. It's the investors in new things happening. So I'm going to wander amongst you because I've learned doing this work, I like to look into people's faces to get a sense of what they're reacting to what it's about. So I'm not actually turning my back on you. I'm trying to be within you. So it's very simple. If you don't have a delivery strategy, what the hell are you going to do with it? I've been doing this for nearly 25 years, and I can count on the fingers of 4 hands brands that have now failed and disappeared because they didn't think about how the future was going to be. And still today, we don't have enough money coming out of governments for this stimulation work. There is one brilliant exception to this, which a friend of mine developed in the state of Israel, now getting a poor reputation for other reasons, Joanna Landau. Benjamin Netanyahu wouldn't fund the brand. He was prime minister, he was foreign secretary, etc., etc. So we had to work with them to do it for the voluntary sector, produced its own brand for the country. A unique experiment, but well worth copying. The thing we've learned is that the skills you need to develop a brand, research the brand, and think about the marketing of it are very different to the skills and knowledge you need for implementation. I'll give you an example. People coming in from the private sector who are looking to invest in the countries or the cities, and at last count, I have worked in 53 countries in the world since 2002 on national brands, nation brands, tourism brands, city brands, district brands, destination brands. most people from the private sector find place branding complex, difficult to understand. And in part, some of it's the way we present it to them. We can be our own worst enemies in that regard. Implementation requires funding for a team of people with the relevant skills, not just to produce the strategy, but to begin the promotion process, the implementation process, to manage that. And if they don't have enough money to do it, who are they going to turn to get that kind of resource and that kind of knowledge? And we call those people stewards, because those are going to be people who, and what I'm doing here is sharing our thinking on this, because we want to try and have you stimulate thinking about brand stewardship in your place. Do you have brand stewards you can call upon? And we want to collect your views in about 15 or 20 minutes through a discussion on that topic and feed them back in. So basically, it's who needs to be involved in brand stewardship beyond your politicians or your team or the consultative groups you've got? And quite importantly, and very little work has been done on this, and you might ask why, what kind of person do you think might make an effective brand steward? Or are you just going to hire the women and men who first turn up for the interview? How are you going to describe what's involved in brand stewardship? And I'll turn to that in a moment. And how do you find them? And how do you recruit them in training? Because what we found with the Place Brand Academy is there is a significant difference in the knowledge of different people working in the field. But most of them need to know more on how to implement and manage the complexity of that. So behind all of this, we are thinking, do we now need a brand stewardship training program? And those of you who want to talk to Mary afterwards, she and her colleagues have got ideas for how to actually do this. So the findings from our research, not quite like Mary's, because she's been speaking to a large number of people over the last 12 months. Ours are going back to the 24 plus years I've had in the field, and my two colleagues, Penny Bagnall-Smith and Janina Warren. Brand implementation is often an afterthought until the shit hits the fan, that your public find out about the brand, and you're thinking, well, who's going to do that? Because you haven't had that conversation along the way. So in our view, brand implementation needs to be forethought. Think about it when you're actually putting the brand together in its final stages. Not day one, but when you know you've got the kind of strategy you really want the country to follow, the city to follow. Think about what are the initial projects? Who's going to fund them? Where are those people to be found? What kind of characteristics do you want? You don't want just every CEO of a major company. Many brands in this country, the brand manager or the leader of the council will go to the CEO of a large aircraft company. Or in Australia, when we were working there, go to the CEO of Qantas. You're the national flag carrier. We need you for the brand strategy. In both of those cases, those two individuals did not think that they could necessarily provide a lot of really helpful information, but they had large staffs who could be seconded and tapped into. So this is a resource that you can begin to think of using. Place branding, as you know, is very complicated. For many people in the private sector, they it's as difficult as that? That much? All of this? How are we going to do this? We think now we're on top of what it's involved after 20 plus years. But the reality is, if we don't start to involve other people from the business community in this, and the voluntary community and the voluntary sector particularly, who have been largely ignored in so many countries around the world and not involved in this process, they can be great ambassadors for you. Not the big name ambassadors of a sporting legend or whoever, but people who will work in the community at a street level, at a neighborhood level, at a district level, to translate the brand for their people and give feedback into you at the central team to basically say, but in our street, what we need is someone to pick up the rats' refuse and the bags being left in the street. I'll give you an example. The city of Birmingham has recently had a major issue with the people who collect the refuse. So much so there have been huge bags of refuse and rats in the street. That has not just damaged the reputation of the cleansing department, it's damaged the whole view of the brand of the city. Are they incapable of doing this? And why are they bothering about 5 years ahead when we can't even manage today? So it's very important to get those kind of people involved. And it requires specific skills and experience. I'm going to share with you some of the attributes of really superb place brand stewards. I'm not going to read you my slides. You can all read English. As a Scotsman, I've learned to do it. The key point is you want to find people who have, to use the American expression, skin in the game. People who will work with you to develop the brand because they get an advantage for their company, their institution, or whoever it is, because they believe they will live that brand and they can contribute to that. And rather than dealing with someone who is necessarily coming anew, and it's not against inward investment, but basically getting people whose interest it is to make the brand successful. This has been discussed today. Brand partnership stakeholders, these are people who come together at the city level for a mayor or at a national level for a prime minister or a president to actually begin to work the brand up. They're quite important. But they're not the same people to implement a brand strategy. You need a different kind of person with different values, different experiences, and different character traits. Brand delivery managers can be the small team sitting that reports to the council or the president or whoever. But brand delivery is beyond that team. Brand delivery is the tourism scheme, the new shopping center, the training program at the further education college, whatever it is. You need those people some way connected into this. Brand investors and project developers. Brand project developers are people who can either exist or are coming in and basically saying, right, we get this, and we're going to develop a new service for different kinds of housing, a new computer program, skills training program. They react to the brand and come in with ideas that are on brand. And you want to be able to develop a system to select brand projects that are completely on brand, and ones that might not be. You don't reject, you work with them to bring it on brand. Your job is to maximize the investment of everyone else, not just in the community, but from other parts of the world. And it does require specific skills and experiences and character traits. Let me just... So what I'm talking about is people who are going to have a stake in the brand. And when you have a stake in a project, two things can happen. You can lose money on it or you can make money on it. I'm being simplistic. And a lot of people, a lot of chief executives I've had experience of working with, fall into the trap of thinking it's going to make me a hero. I'm going to get an OBE or a certificate or whatever it is. You don't really want people like that. But they may have someone in their organization who doesn't have those kind of grandiose thinking. You're wanting people who have knowledge that you don't have, who have access to markets you have not got entry in, who have, if you like, ideas for brand projects, but you want to bring it on brand. So someone will come in and describe a project to you, and you think, that's not bad, that's pretty good, but it's not quite on brand. So you have to explain what being on brand is in all respects for your project to be able to do that. And those are the projects that you schedule in advance of announcing the brand. A couple of brands I've worked with in London boroughs fall into the trap of being rushed by the leader of the council and be put it out. And the first guy from the Times, the Guardian, or the local newspaper said, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, where do we start? What's going to happen now that hasn't happened before? And you need an answer to that. Because if you don't, the brand is, pardon my language, fucked. Because people are just simply not going to take it seriously. So brand stewards, in my experience, this is not kind of human resource research. These are statements of the characteristics of people I have found over 25 years to be very effective at doing this. The ability to manage the complexity of a place brand is a rare skill, and it's not taught. You have to learn it as you go. I say it's not taught yet, but the Place Brand Academy is creating course material to be able to do this. The thing that those people give you is their time, their knowledge, their energy, and their commitment. They're not asking for payment, a lot of them. But with them, you will create a better brand, and you will more likely achieve your objectives in time. The CEOs I mentioned to you, they didn't think they were the right people, despite them being national characters and recognition, but they found people within the organization that had those kind of skills. So you need to be knowing what the person's spec is. Who are you looking for as a steward? And one of the key things they've got to be able to do is talk in a common language that can be understood across professions. And early days work, when I was working in Amsterdam back in 2003, was the city town planners never talked to the marketing department. They're both speaking Dutch. They never talked to the budget managers. And so one of the big challenges we found very early on in our work is you have to have people who are able to cross the fence, cross the floor, and hear what the other people are saying, and not instant reaction saying, no, we don't do it that way in the planning department. You have to find the way of doing it together, whatever that actually is. These are some of the character traits of people we've found that are effective stewards. They're very active listeners. You're being very active listeners, thank you very much. By that I mean, so many people involved in government arrive at the table with their own agenda. There's point scoring going on. There's maybe a bit of revenge being taken, whatever it is. I've been in meetings where people have not listened to what people have been saying. They've been thinking about, how do I counter what that person's been saying, not making what I would call a building point and building some consensus and agreement. By and large, they're curious people. They ask the questions, well, how do you do that? How could we go about that? Where could we find the money for that? So they're willing to explore ideas that may not be common to them, they may not have had experience of. And in a way, they're using soft power softly. They're bringing to the table things that could help someone else do their job better, and in doing it, contribute to the brand in a better way. And that's quite important. Because this is a community-wide team effort, if you like. It is not the small brand team. It's not the brand partnership. It's finding a way of maximizing the involvement of the people in your country, in your city, in your community. And it could be, yes, sectoral on a tourism project, or it could be inward investment. But on something like a city brand strategy, you want to be able to tap into an amazing resource, which is the knowledge, the skills, the experience of the population that you're serving. Do you know what they're good at? I don't by that mean getting qualifications. Do you know how well people in communities that are significantly deprived actually overcome those obstacles despite government? And those are the kind of people you want to find and bring on board in the team. You have to unite the disparate views in some way, and we've had some examples of that in the projects we've heard about. Interestingly, it's been my experience that the people who are best at that are good at willing to give to get. They are willing to give up a bit of their pet agenda to get something that's bigger and better for the community. They recognize that sticking out for their little piece of extra is not going to do the community much good. But if they can get involved in something that's a team And it's building something that really the brand needs and can say something about. And it's always saying to you, my experience of doing this is the brand strategy at the point in time you're having these discussions is old hat. Because what you've tapped into are people who have a passion for the brand you haven't consulted before, because you never involved them. So the earlier you do this, the better it is. And getting people who have clear expectations of what the brand can do, as opposed to some highfalutin, imaginative, potential promise if we get things right. There's no point in saying those sort of things, particularly to politicians who hijack it. And prior to being a brander, I worked in British local government and central government for 25 years. I have a jaundiced view about most politicians. Not necessarily out for personal gain, but there are other agendas at work. And we just have to recognize that is a given for the field. It happens in so many countries. We need to take stock of that. So, we are going to talk about 3 questions. You're going to split into people at your table. If you're sitting on a small table with no one else at it, join another table. We are very interested to know what your answer to those questions are. We're not asking you to cover all the questions. It's pick one that you think you can add something to. We're wanting to get back from you your answers to this, because we want, at this point in time, to continue this conversation with everyone who's here over time, to make it begin to, as we do it over time, we'll get more people involved. We want to create a cadre, if you like, of effective brand stewards who can share with each other how to implement, how to manage. Because one of the biggest issues we've got in place branding is the sector has not yet agreed what represents good governance. The sector has not yet agreed what skills do we need and how do we get them. And we need, it owes us to people who earn our living doing this. We've got to somehow bring ourselves together. I hear the examples of one slogan is used in Finland, one slogan is used in Sweden. I get the difference from that. What's more important is, could Sweden and Finland and Latvia and Estonia and Ukraine, as it comes out of the problems it's currently got, come together to create a consensus, a standard for how this should be done? And could we do it in other parts of the world? Could it be done in North America? There are now over 4,500 people actively employed in place branding around the world in teams set up. It's not enough. We need more kindred spirits. We need more people. You may know them. You could act as the recruiting agent for it. I've run out of time. I hope that's been helpful. And please split up. 15 minutes to think about the answer to a question. Then my colleague Penny will come among you to get feedback from that. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I know that a few of you have started to eat lunch already, so I know that time is short and appetites are arising. So we're going to start off this session, and my table has got the first answer to the question. So I'm going to ask you to just speak into the microphone and let people know the answer to, I think it was the who.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Our team here, we discussed that the who for the brand stewardship should be governments, and citizens, because we believe that for an authentic brand stewardship, the government is the one that actually, pushes the brand. So if governments do not have the buy-in and give out all the necessary funds, it will be difficult for the brand stewardship. Should we go to the what?
Yes, have a quick go.
Okay. And the what kind of person do you think might make an effective brand steward? We settled that the people must be very patriotic and they should have a sense of national pride, advocating for the country, and not necessarily blind nationalism. And the how, we are still deliberating on that. We don't know yet.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to, are there any volunteers, or am I just going to pounce on the table as I come past? Okay, you look like a man who's going to handle the microphone.
So, hello? Yeah. So we have a kind of a Polish table here. So we are all from Poland, including Konrad. So we take the first question. So who needs to be involved in the brand stewardship? So we had a kind of a discussion because the current state of Polish brand stewardship look like it's scattered. It's scattered. So we have like 50 plus different local government and government organizations who are theoretically responsible for promoting Poland internationally. So we decided that we need kind of a one body that basically takes control and gives the direction, does the research, insights, and produces one, I would say, one communication that can be spread to all to the different, I would say, organizations who are promoting Poland, and they have budgets, of course. So something similar that Finland does.
Sounds like a very sensible way forward. So it's unifying 50 views
Yeah,
into something a
kind
bit
of.
more akin to one.
And we actually are trying to do that, so starting in May. So it already happened.
Fantastic.
So we are at the beginning of the road, actually.
Well, good luck with that, because that sounds like a very splendid way forward. Thank you very much indeed. Right, and for our next table.
Hello, thank you. So we looked at the first question, who needs to be involved in brand stewardship? And we're a table from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Liverpool. So, you know, really different views. But Turkey's obviously just changed to Turkey, so it's there we go. And so that was an interesting discussion on where that came from. And we decided when you're starting to look at who needs to be involved in brand stewardship, what's really important is the reason for it and the objective for it, and that's going to guide who you need on that journey. So, of course, from the top, from senior officials, but also down to the citizens and the person on the street who's going to be able to tell the authentic story of the brand. And also the creatives and storytellers that you need to bring with you along that journey to make sure that it speaks to people. And also we talked about, you know, projection of reputation and security and keeping, you know, the identity safe within that.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I think the idea of having inspirational storytellers spreading the news is an excellent one. Right, so for our next table, you're being pointed at, so here you go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we've spoken with quite different countries represented, Sweden, Nigeria, Mongolia, Brazil as well. And we said it's much about sort of working within the system that you have. It differs quite a lot. I see a lot of resemblance with Finland, what Meira told, with Sweden, because we work quite sort of bottoms up, because as Meira told us that everything that she has presented the platform for has not, they recognize themselves. I would say it's the same in Sweden. We could also maybe also change brand platform with Finland, but we will change sauna to bastu instead. That's the only thing. But it's to work within the system, and that differs quite heavily among countries. And like we talked about with Mongolia and Nigeria, etc., it's also to find someone that sort of can bring the country together in some sense, that different views, political views, or etc., sort of come together and view as someone that can bring everything together and do it good. We also talk about events like the Olympics in London, for example, brought some pride to the community, brought different people together, and also brought investments, etc. So it depends on which country and which system you work in, what you have to work from.
But I love the idea of the unity and bringing people together to talk with one voice.
Yes, and that could be a person or a company or whatever.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right, I'm going to come down towards this center of the room. Yes, lovely. Who there?
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Even those who are on the food area. Okay. So our table had discussed what kind of people do you think might make an effective brand. So we were discussing on the decision, whether it's the decision makers or owner or private sector, they need to be a voice of the people. So that person, we particularly focused on a personality of that person. So we call it the core of 10 models, not by AI, but so those 10s are catalyst, confident, convincing, credible, consistent, communication, continuity, customer focus, thank you very much, and then consistent, and commercial. So if we have that person, if we have that decision maker, if we have that leader, we'll be able to, he or she will be able to find a brand or to effectively represent that brand to take it forward.
Thank you. That's a tremendous list of attributes. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, right, is there anyone on this table who would like to have a word? No? I'm going to move on. Right. You're eating, so I'm going to come to this table and hope that somebody here...
Yeah, go on.
Thank you.
We decided that what you actually recruit for in this world is authenticity. So what kind of things should you be therefore worried about? And I think, at least I hope I represent some of the views around the table, but we were much more concerned with not necessarily the people, but the raw materials that make up the kind. So what do you draw on? You know, we did allude to some semi-people things, such as, you know, if the UK, William Shakespeare, we had a great representative from Slovenia with their kind of obsession with health and sport and all of the things that make them a vital kind of country. We talked about Ukraine as the breadbasket that feeds the world at times. So rather than just think about it as, so what are the raw materials you work with that are based around authenticity rather than necessarily some character type? So that's what we said.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Thank you very much. All of those views are incredibly interesting and important, and we're going to feed them back into our research on the whole topic of brand stewardship. And I think, Conrad, you said that we will be able to send out a summary to people who've attended the conference. So thank you for your time and your thoughts. Much appreciated.